Tonight, you're going to discover something that Buddhist monks have guarded as their most precious secret for over 2,500 years. Something so powerful that it can instantly quiet the endless noise in your mind and transform how you experience stress, anger, and worry. These aren't just meditation techniques or breathing exercises. These are ancient stories that work like keys, unlocking your mind's natural ability to find deep, lasting peace. And here's what makes them extraordinary. As these tales unfold, you'll start to see yourself in them. Your own struggles, your own patterns, your own search for happiness reflected in characters who lived centuries ago. This recognition itself is healing. When you truly see yourself in these stories, your racing thoughts naturally begin to slow. The weight you've been carrying starts to lift. You don't need to believe anything or know anything about Buddhism. These stories work even if you've tried everything else and nothing has helped. Even if your mind never stops worrying. Even if you think you're too stressed or too far gone to find real peace. The Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within, do not seek it without." Tonight, you'll discover exactly what this means and why you've been looking for happiness in all the wrong places. So let yourself get comfortable and prepare to meet yourself in these ancient mirrors of wisdom. Our first story takes place by a peaceful river, where a man is about to learn something that will forever change how he reacts to difficult people. Picture a peaceful evening on a quiet river. The sun is setting, painting everything in golden light. An old man gently rows his small boat through the calm waters, enjoying this perfect moment of tranquility. This is his favorite time of day, when the world grows still and his mind finds complete peace. But tonight, something is about to shatter that peace entirely. As he drifts downstream, he suddenly notices another boat heading directly toward him. At first, he calls out politely, "Be careful there," but the boat doesn't change course. It keeps coming straight at him. His heartbeat quickens. "Move aside," he shouts louder now, "you're going to crash into me." His perfect evening is suddenly flooded with panic and rising anger as he watches this reckless boater barreling toward him. The boats collide with a loud, jarring thump. The old man is ready to explode with fury until he looks over and realizes something that stops him cold. The boat is completely empty. There's no one inside. It was just drifting with the current, carried by forces beyond anyone's control. In that single moment, all his anger vanishes like morning mist. Now here's what I want you to notice about yourself. As I told this story, what were you feeling toward that reckless boater? Even knowing it's just a story, didn't part of you feel annoyed at this inconsiderate person who was ruining the old man's peaceful evening? That reaction you just had is exactly what this story is about. Think about your own life right now. When was the last time you got really upset with someone? Maybe they cut you off in traffic, didn't respond to your text, or seemed rude to you. In that moment of anger, what story did you create about their intentions? Here's what the Buddha understood about human nature that most of us never realize. We constantly fill empty boats with stories. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and you immediately think, "What a selfish person." But what if they're rushing to the hospital? Your coworker doesn't say good morning, and you assume they're ignoring you. But what if they just received devastating news from home? In Zen Buddhism, this pattern is called mental proliferation. It's the way our minds automatically create elaborate narratives about other people's motivations. We take things personally when they're often not personal at all. Think about this honestly. How much of your daily stress comes from stories you're telling yourself about what other people meant by their actions? How much energy do you spend being upset about things that might have had nothing to do with you? The Buddha taught something profound. You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger. Every time we react to these empty boats, we are the ones who suffer. The other person continues their day, often completely unaware they've affected us. But here's what's beautiful about recognizing this pattern. Once you see it, you're free. When someone seems rude or inconsiderate, you can pause and ask yourself, am I filling an empty boat with my own story right now? Let me give you something practical to try. For the next week, when someone's behavior upsets you, before you react, ask yourself this question. What if this person isn't thinking about me at all? What if they're dealing with something I know nothing about? Notice how this simple question changes your emotional response. Notice how much lighter you feel when you stop taking everything personally. This doesn't mean becoming passive or never setting boundaries. It means responding from wisdom rather than reactive assumptions. It means choosing your peace over the exhausting habit of making everything about you. In Zen practice, we learn that most of the time, the boats that upset us are actually empty. The stories we create about other people's intentions exist only in our minds. When we stop filling these empty boats with our assumptions, we discover something amazing. We can maintain our inner peace regardless of what's happening around us. As you reflect on your own empty boats, remember this. The goal isn't to never feel upset. It's to recognize when you're creating your own suffering through the stories you tell yourself about others. But what happens when you're facing a real crisis? When there's actual danger and nowhere to run? What if you're trapped between two tigers with no way out? Our next story takes us to a terrifying moment that reveals something profound about finding peace even in life's most desperate circumstances. Deep in the mountains of ancient China, a monk was taking his daily walk through the forest. He loved these quiet journeys where he could reflect on the Buddha's teachings and enjoy nature's beauty. The pine trees swayed gently in the breeze, birds sang their evening songs, and all was peaceful in his world. But today, his peaceful walk was about to become a fight for survival. Suddenly, he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. The roar of a tiger. He turned to see a massive, hungry tiger charging toward him through the trees, its eyes locked on him with predatory focus. Without thinking, he ran. The monk sprinted down the mountain path as fast as his legs could carry him, his robes flying behind him. He could hear the tiger gaining ground, its powerful paws thundering on the earth behind him. In sheer desperation, he spotted a vine hanging over the edge of a steep cliff. He grabbed it and began climbing down, hoping to escape. But when he looked down, his heart sank completely. Far below, another tiger paced at the bottom of the cliff, waiting for him to fall. He was trapped. One tiger above, one tiger below, hanging from a vine with no way out. Now imagine yourself in this situation. Death above, death below. What would be racing through your mind? Panic, terror, regret about things you never did, probably all of these and more. But here's where the story becomes extraordinary. As the monk hung there, facing what seemed like certain death, something caught his eye. Growing from a small crack in the cliff face was a wild strawberry plant. On it hung a single, perfectly ripe strawberry. What do you think he did? He reached out, plucked the strawberry, and ate it. And according to the story, it was the sweetest, most delicious strawberry he had ever tasted in his entire life. Before you dismiss this as impossible or crazy, let me ask you something. What was the monk actually facing in that moment? The future threat of the tigers or the present reality of hanging safely on the vine? In that moment of eating the strawberry, was he in immediate danger, or was he simply alive, breathing, and capable of experiencing sweetness? This story contains one of the most profound teachings in all of Buddhism, and it directly applies to your life right now. The Buddha said, "Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment." This monk understood something that most of us struggle with our entire lives. Here's a deeply personal question for you. How much of your suffering comes from tigers that aren't actually attacking you right now? Think about it honestly. The tiger above represents your past. All your regrets, mistakes, painful memories, and things you cannot change. How much mental energy do you spend replaying conversations you wish had gone differently? Thinking about opportunities you missed, beating yourself up over decisions you made years ago. The tiger below represents your future, your worries, fears, and anxieties about what might happen. How much time do you spend imagining worst-case scenarios, worrying about your job security, your health, your relationships, rehearsing conversations that may never happen? Be brutally honest with yourself right now. How much of your day is spent suspended between these two tigers, missing the strawberries completely? Most of us live exactly like this. We are so busy rehearsing the past or fearing the future that we miss the simple joys available right now. We are physically present, but mentally absent, always somewhere else. But here's what's profound about the monk's choice. The strawberry doesn't represent denial or foolish optimism. He wasn't pretending the tigers didn't exist. He was choosing to be fully present with what was actually happening in this moment, rather than being consumed by what might happen next. In Zen practice, we learn that the only moment we actually possess is this one, right now. This breath you're taking, this sensation of being alive. Everything else is memory or imagination. Let me ask you something practical. As you're listening to this right now, what strawberries are available to you? Maybe it's the comfort of wherever you're sitting, the fact that you're breathing easily, the simple miracle that your heart is beating without you having to think about it. Perhaps it's a memory of someone you love or the peace of this moment before sleep. When you're stuck in traffic, do you fume about being late, or do you notice the strawberry? Maybe your favorite song comes on the radio, or you see interesting people in other cars, or you have a few rare minutes to just think without interruption. When you're having a difficult conversation, are you rehearsing your defense or planning your counterattack? Or can you be present with the person in front of you, maybe noticing something you never saw before in their expression? When you're lying in bed at night, are you replaying the day's problems or tomorrow's schedule? Or can you simply feel the comfort of your pillow, the rhythm of your breathing, the gift of rest after a long day? This practice isn't about becoming irresponsible or ignoring real problems. It's about not wasting your life being consumed by problems that exist only in your mind. It's about finding the peace and joy that are available right now, even in difficult circumstances. The monk, hanging between two tigers, discovered something we all need to learn. The present moment, no matter how challenging, always contains something sweet if we are present enough to taste it. The tigers of past and future will always be there. But between them, in this eternal now, there are always strawberries waiting to be discovered. The question is, are you present enough to reach for them? But speaking of creating our own problems, there's something else the Buddha discovered that might shock you. He found that for every real difficulty we face, we typically add 10 imaginary ones. In fact, he taught that most human suffering isn't caused by what happens to us, but by what we do to ourselves in our minds afterward. Let me show you exactly what I mean with a teaching that could eliminate half your suffering overnight. One day, the Buddha was sitting with his students in a peaceful grove when one of them approached with a question that haunts most of us. "Master," the student said, "why do we suffer so much? Pain seems to follow us everywhere. How can we find peace?" The Buddha looked at his student with deep compassion and said, "Imagine a person struck by an arrow. This arrow causes pain, and this pain is unavoidable. This is the first arrow." The students nodded, understanding that life inevitably brings challenges: illness, loss, disappointment, conflict. These things happen to everyone. But now, the Buddha continued, imagine that this same person is immediately struck by a second arrow. This second arrow is not shot by someone else. It comes from the person's own mind. The anger, fear, resentment, or despair that follows the original pain. This is the second arrow. He paused, letting this profound insight sink in. The first arrow is unavoidable. Life brings pain to everyone. But the second arrow, the suffering we add through our mental reactions, this is optional. Now, before I explain this further, I want you to think about a recent disappointment or difficulty in your own life. Maybe you didn't get a job you wanted, had an argument with someone you care about, or received some bad news about your health or finances. Here's my question for you. How much of your suffering came from the actual event, the first arrow, and how much came from your thoughts about the event, the second arrows? This distinction might be the most important thing you ever learn about your own mind. Let me give you an example that will make this crystal clear. Imagine you get sick with the flu. The physical discomfort, the fever, aches and fatigue, that's the first arrow. It's unpleasant, but it's manageable. Your body knows how to heal, and in a few days you'll feel better. But then your mind kicks in with the second arrows. This is terrible. I can't afford to be sick right now. I'm going to fall behind at work. What if this leads to something worse? What if I gave it to my family? Why does this always happen to me? I must have a weak immune system. Maybe I'm not taking care of myself properly. What if my boss thinks I'm unreliable? Do you see what happened? One simple flu became a full-scale crisis in your mind. The second arrows often hurt far more than the first. Think about relationships. When someone you care about seems distant or upset, what's the first arrow? Maybe some natural sadness or concern, but then come the second arrows. They don't love me anymore. I must have done something wrong. They're probably going to leave me. I'm not good enough. I always mess up relationships. I'm going to end up alone, or consider work stress. You make a mistake or receive criticism. The first arrow might be some embarrassment or disappointment, but then your mind unleashes a barrage of second arrows. I'm terrible at my job. Everyone thinks I'm incompetent. I'm going to get fired. I'll never find another job. My career is over. I'm a failure. In Buddhism, we study the mind's tendency toward what's called proliferation. It's the way one thought triggers another and another, creating elaborate stories that exist only in our heads. We take a simple, temporary experience and turn it into a complex drama with ourselves as the victim. Here's a question that might change your life. Think about something you're worried about right now. How much of your anxiety is about what's actually happening versus what might happen? How many second arrows are you shooting at yourself? The Buddha discovered something revolutionary about human nature. Most of our suffering isn't caused by life's inevitable first arrows. It's caused by the second arrows we shoot at ourselves through our thoughts and mental reactions. And here's what's amazing. Once you understand this teaching, you gain tremendous power over your own experience. You can't always control the first arrows of life, but you have real choice about the second arrows. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending everything is fine. It means learning to be with difficult experiences without adding layers of mental suffering on top. Let me give you something practical you can use immediately. The next time something upsetting happens, try this 3-step process. First, notice the difference between what actually happened and your thoughts about what happened. Ask yourself, what's the real situation versus the story I'm creating about it? The first arrow versus the second arrows. Second, return to what's happening right now in your body and environment. What do you physically feel? What do you see and hear? This grounds you in reality rather than mental proliferation. Third, treat yourself with the same kindness you'd show a good friend. You wouldn't tell a friend that their sadness is wrong or shameful. Extend that same compassion to yourself. In Zen practice, we learn to recognize second arrows as they're happening. We notice when our minds are creating additional suffering and gently redirect our attention to what's actually true in this moment. The goal isn't to become invulnerable to life's challenges. It's to meet them with wisdom rather than reactivity. When you stop shooting second arrows, you discover something remarkable. You're much more resilient than you thought. You can handle life's difficulties with grace, strength, and even peace. The Buddha taught that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. In understanding this difference, we find one of the keys to genuine freedom. But here's something that might surprise you even more. What if I told you that your immediate judgments about whether things are good or bad might be completely wrong? What if apparent disasters sometimes turn out to be hidden blessings, and what seems like wonderful luck might lead to unexpected problems? There's a wise farmer who understood this better than anyone, and his story will forever change how you react to life's constant ups and downs. In a small village lived an old farmer known throughout the region for his unusual responses to life's ups and downs. No matter what happened, fortunate or unfortunate, he always said the same thing: "We'll see." His neighbors found this response both puzzling and frustrating. How could anyone be so calm about everything? One morning, the farmer's only horse, essential for plowing his fields and his very livelihood, broke through the fence and ran away into the mountains. When word spread through the village, neighbors gathered at his home to offer sympathy. "What terrible luck!" they exclaimed. "How will you farm without your horse? Your crops will fail. This is such a disaster. You must be devastated." The old farmer listened to their concerns with a peaceful expression and simply replied, "We'll see." The neighbors exchanged confused glances. How could he be so indifferent to such obvious misfortune? 3 days later, something unexpected happened. The horse returned, but it wasn't alone. It brought with it 7 magnificent wild horses from the mountains. Now the farmer who had owned just 1 horse suddenly had 8 beautiful animals in his corral. When the neighbors heard this news, they rushed back to the farmer's home, this time with congratulations and excitement. "What incredible fortune," they declared. "You're now the richest farmer in the village. These horses are worth a fortune. What amazing luck." Again, the farmer listened with the same calm demeanor and simply said, "We'll see." "Now, before I continue, let me ask you something personal. Think about a recent event in your life that you immediately labeled as either good or bad. How quickly did you make that judgment? How certain were you that you understood what this event would mean for your future?" The next day in our story, the farmer's son decided to begin training the wild horses. While attempting to break in a particularly spirited stallion, he was thrown violently to the ground and broke his leg badly. The injury was severe, and it was clear he wouldn't be able to help with the crucial harvest season. Once more the neighbors gathered, now with expressions of sympathy and concern. "What bad luck," they said, shaking their heads. "Your son is injured and can't help with the farm work. With harvest time coming, this is truly terrible timing. What a tragedy this has become." The farmer acknowledged their concern with gratitude, but gave his familiar response, "We'll see." A week later, something happened that changed everything. The emperor's army marched through the village with orders to conscript all healthy young men for a dangerous war against a neighboring kingdom. It was a brutal conflict, and everyone knew that many of those taken would never return home. The soldiers went from house to house, taking away the sons of every family. But when they came to the farmer's home and saw his son with a badly broken leg, they passed him by. He was unfit for military service. The neighbors, whose own sons had been taken away to war, came to the farmer with tears in their eyes. They expressed both their sorrow for their own losses and their amazement at what now appeared to be the farmer's incredible good fortune. And you can probably guess what the farmer said. "We'll see." This story reveals something profound about human nature that most of us never recognize. We constantly judge our experiences as good or bad based on incomplete information. We see only a tiny slice of the picture, yet we react as if we understand the whole story. Think honestly about your own life right now. How many times have you been devastated by something that later turned out to be a blessing in disguise? Maybe you didn't get a job you desperately wanted, but that rejection led you to something even better. Perhaps a relationship ended painfully, but that ending created space for personal growth or meeting someone more compatible with who you're becoming. Conversely, how often have apparent successes created new problems you never anticipated? You get a promotion, but discover the new position brings incredible stress and ruins your work-life balance. You win some money, but find it complicates your relationships with family and friends. You get exactly what you thought you wanted, only to realize it's not what you actually needed. In Zen Buddhism, this insight is called understanding interdependence. It's the recognition that everything is connected to everything else in ways we can't always see immediately. The farmer understood this deeply. He knew that life's events flow into each other in an endless stream of causes and effects, each development setting up the next in ways we rarely anticipate. But here's what's most profound about the farmer's approach. He wasn't passive or fatalistic. Notice that he still took appropriate action at every stage. He searched for his lost horse, cared for his injured son, and adapted to each new situation as it arose. But he did so without the extra suffering that comes from premature judgment and emotional reactivity. Let me ask you this: how much energy do you waste riding emotional roller coasters based on your immediate reactions to events? How often do you celebrate prematurely or despair unnecessarily because you're judging situations with incomplete information? The farmer's we'll see represents something called don't know mind in Zen. It's the practice of maintaining openness and curiosity rather than rushing to conclusions. When you develop this perspective, you waste less energy on emotional extremes and have more resources available for responding wisely to whatever actually unfolds. Here's a practice that can transform how you experience life's constant changes. The next time something apparently terrible happens, instead of immediately catastrophizing, take a breath and think we'll see. Maybe this difficulty will teach you something important. Maybe it will lead to unexpected opportunities. Maybe it will reveal strength you didn't know you had. Similarly, when something wonderful happens, enjoy it fully but hold it lightly. Maybe this success will continue, maybe it won't. Maybe it will lead to new challenges that help you grow in ways you couldn't have imagined. This isn't pessimism, it's profound realism. Life is constantly changing, and our limited perspective means we rarely see the full consequences of any event. The farmer's wisdom teaches us to surf the waves of change rather than being tossed around by them. In Zen practice, we learn that our judgments about good and bad are often projections of our limited understanding rather than accurate assessments of reality. When we can hold our judgments lightly, we discover a kind of freedom that allows us to meet life with curiosity rather than reactivity. The farmer knew something that took him a lifetime to learn. Life is far more mysterious and interconnected than we can ever fully comprehend. Our job isn't to figure it all out, but to respond wisely to what's actually in front of us while remaining open to possibilities we haven't yet imagined. But what happens when someone tries to destroy your peace directly? When they attack you with anger, criticism, or deliberate hostility? Can you maintain this same wisdom when someone is intentionally trying to upset you? Our next story reveals one of the most powerful teachings about protecting your inner peace while still remaining compassionate. The Buddha was teaching under his favorite Bodhi tree when an angry man approached with fury burning in his eyes. This man felt threatened by the Buddha's growing influence in the community and had decided to confront him publicly, hoping to humiliate him in front of his followers. In front of all the Buddha's students, the man began shouting with venomous intensity, "You're nothing but a fraud. Who do you think you are, pretending to be wise and enlightened? You're just deceiving these innocent people with your empty words." The Buddha remained completely calm. His expression didn't change. He didn't argue, defend himself, or show any signs of being disturbed. This lack of reaction only intensified the man's rage. "How dare you sit there acting superior?" The man screamed even louder. "You think you're better than everyone else? I refuse to show respect to a charlatan like you." Still, the Buddha said nothing. He simply observed the man's fury with the same peaceful attention he might give to watching clouds pass overhead. After several minutes of shouting himself hoarse, the man grew exhausted. Confused and frustrated by the Buddha's complete lack of reaction, he demanded, "Why won't you say anything? Why won't you defend yourself? Don't you care what I think of you?" The Buddha looked at him with eyes full of compassion and asked a simple question that would change everything. "Tell me, if someone offers you a gift and you decline to accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The man, caught off guard by this unexpected question, thought for a moment before responding. "It would still belong to the person offering it, I suppose. If I don't take it, the gift remains theirs." "Exactly," said the Buddha with a gentle smile. "And in the same way, if you offer me your anger, your insults, and your hatred, and I choose not to accept them, to whom do they belong?" The man stood there stunned, suddenly understanding what had just happened. His anger had not affected the Buddha at all. Instead, it remained his own burden to carry. "Now, before I explain what this means for your life, I want you to think about your own reactions to other people's negativity. When someone criticizes you, insults you, or treats you rudely, what happens inside you? Do you automatically absorb their emotion and make it your own? Here's something most people never realize, and it might be the most liberating truth you ever learn. Other people cannot make you angry. They can say things, they can do things, but your anger is your own creation, your own choice. This might sound impossible at first, but think about it. Have you ever noticed that the same comment that devastates you on a bad day might not bother you at all when you're feeling confident? Have you seen how the same person's behavior affects different people in completely different ways? This proves that your emotional response isn't automatically determined by external events. Let me ask you something deeply personal. How much of your emotional state depends on how other people treat you? How often do you hand over your peace of mind to someone else's mood, opinion, or behavior? When your boss is critical, do you automatically feel worthless? When your partner is grumpy, do you absorb their grumpiness and become irritable yourself? When a stranger is rude, does their rudeness become your rudeness? When someone doesn't text you back, do you spiral into anxiety about what you did wrong? The Buddha's teaching reveals something revolutionary about emotional freedom. You can decline these emotional gifts. Someone can offer you their anger, criticism, disappointment, or negativity, and you can simply choose not to accept it. In Zen Buddhism, this understanding is called non-reactivity. It's the ability to respond rather than react. The difference is crucial. Reacting is automatic, unconscious, driven by old patterns and conditioning. Responding is conscious, chosen, based on wisdom rather than impulse. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally disconnected or cold. The Buddha wasn't indifferent to the man's suffering. You can see his compassion in how gently he explained the teaching. But he chose his response from a place of inner peace rather than reactivity. Here's a practice that can transform every relationship in your life. The next time someone offers you the gift of their negativity, imagine them holding out a box containing their anger, criticism, or hostility. Picture yourself looking at this gift and saying, "Thank you, but I don't need that today." Then imagine setting it down and walking away. You can acknowledge what they're going through without absorbing their emotional state. You can show compassion for their pain without making their pain your pain. You can even help them if appropriate, but from a place of choice rather than automatic reaction. But here's what's even more profound about this teaching. When you stop accepting other people's emotional gifts, you often give them the space they need to find their own peace. The angry man in our story eventually became one of the Buddha's students, transformed by experiencing unconditional acceptance rather than the reactive hostility he expected. Think about this carefully. How many arguments could you avoid if you simply refused to accept the gift of someone else's anger? How much drama would disappear from your life if you stopped taking responsibility for other people's emotional states? Your boss has a bad day and snaps at everyone. Instead of absorbing their stress and becoming stressed yourself, you can recognize that their mood belongs to them. You can respond professionally without personalizing their reaction. Your friend is going through a difficult time and takes their frustration out on you. Instead of getting defensive or hurt, you can see their behavior as a reflection of their inner struggle, not a judgment of your worth. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and you feel that familiar surge of road rage beginning. But then you remember the gift teaching. Their reckless driving is their gift to offer. You don't have to accept the anger. You can simply focus on driving safely. The Buddha taught something else profound in this story. He said, "Anger is like a hot coal you pick up intending to throw at someone else, but you're the one who gets burned." Every time you accept someone else's anger and make it your own, you're the one who suffers first and most. They've already moved on with their day while you're still carrying their emotional burden. Your emotional freedom is one of your most precious possessions. Stop giving it away to anyone who wants to disturb your peace. You have the power to choose which emotional gifts you accept and which ones you politely decline. In Zen practice, we learn that maintaining your inner peace isn't selfish. It's actually one of the greatest gifts you can give to others. When you remain centered and calm, you become a source of stability in their emotional storm. You offer them something they can't find anywhere else, the presence of someone who isn't swept away by the drama. But what about the things and people you love most? How do you care deeply while knowing that everything is temporary? How do you love fully while understanding that loss is inevitable? Our next story reveals a secret about appreciation that might surprise you and change how you experience everything precious in your life. In a mountain monastery, a wise Zen master was conducting tea ceremony with his students. As he held up a simple clay teacup, beautiful in its earthy simplicity, he gazed at it for a long, contemplative moment. Then he made a statement that puzzled everyone present. "This teacup is already broken." The students looked at each other in confusion. The cup appeared perfectly intact, beautiful, whole, and functional. One brave student spoke up. "Master, the teacup isn't broken. It looks perfectly fine to me. Why do you say it's already broken?" The master smiled with infinite gentleness. "In my mind, this teacup is already broken. It may seem whole now, but one day, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps years from now, it will break. This is inevitable. When I truly understand that it's already broken, I can fully appreciate it as it is right now, without clinging to it. I can enjoy drinking tea from it, knowing that its existence is temporary." He paused, allowing his words to settle in the quiet room. "Everything in life is like this teacup. All things, no matter how beautiful or precious, are impermanent. We cannot hold onto them forever. When we understand this deeply, we are free to love them fully without the fear of losing them." Now, before you dismiss this as depressing, let me ask you something deeply personal. What in your life are you desperately trying to keep from changing? Your youth, your health, your relationships, your children living at home, your job security, your appearance. One student asked the question that was on everyone's mind. "But Master, doesn't this make life sad? If everything will end, why care about anything at all?" The Master shook his head with compassion. "It's exactly the opposite. When we accept impermanence, we can love more deeply, not less. We're not wasting energy trying to prevent the inevitable. We can be present with what we have now, appreciating its preciousness precisely because it won't last forever. Think about your own attachments right now. How much energy do you spend fighting against natural changes? How much anxiety comes from trying to freeze time, to keep things exactly as they are? Maybe you look in the mirror and feel distressed by signs of aging, desperately trying to hold onto your younger appearance. Perhaps you worry constantly about your children growing up and leaving home, unable to enjoy their childhood because you're already mourning its end. You might cling to a job that no longer fulfills you because you're terrified of change. The Master's insight addresses one of the deepest sources of human suffering, our resistance to change and loss. We exhaust ourselves fighting against the fundamental nature of reality. We act as if we can somehow make permanent what is naturally temporary. In Buddhism, this attachment to permanence is considered the root of suffering. It's not life's changes that hurt us, it's our resistance to those changes. When we truly accept impermanence, something miraculous happens. We stop wasting energy fighting reality and start fully embracing what's actually here. This is why the Master could say the teacup was already broken with such peace. He wasn't being morbid or pessimistic. He was being profoundly realistic, and this realism liberated him to appreciate the teacup completely in this moment. Let me ask you something that might change how you see everything in your life. What if accepting that your relationships are temporary actually made you love more deeply? What if knowing that your time with your parents is limited made you listen more carefully when they speak? What if understanding that your children's dependence on you is fleeting made you more present for their small moments? This perspective doesn't diminish love, it enhances it. When you know that this conversation with your partner might be one of thousands or one of your last, you pay attention differently. When you understand that your pet's life is much shorter than yours, you appreciate their daily presence more fully. In Japanese culture, there's a concept called mono no aware, a bittersweet awareness of the impermanence of all things that makes them more beautiful, not less. The cherry blossoms are treasured precisely because they bloom for such a short time. Their brief flowering makes them more precious than flowers that last all year. The practice isn't about dwelling on death and loss, but about letting this awareness inform how you live. Instead of taking things for granted, you develop what might be called appreciative presence. You see clearly what you have while you have it. Many people fear that accepting impermanence will make them passive or uncaring. Actually, the opposite happens. When you stop using your energy to fight inevitable changes, you have more resources available for loving fully, working meaningfully, and helping others. Here's a practice that can transform your relationship with everything you care about. Tonight, look around at your life as if seeing it for the first time. Your home, your relationships, your health, your abilities. Imagine that you're already at the end of your life, looking back at this moment. What would you appreciate that you're currently taking for granted? The master's teacup is already broken, and so is everything else in your life. Your body will age. Your relationships will change. Your career will end. Your children will grow up and create their own lives. All of this is not a tragedy to be avoided, but the natural rhythm of existence to be embraced. Can you love your life not despite its impermanence, but because of it? Can you appreciate what you have right now, knowing it won't last forever? This acceptance doesn't diminish the beauty of life. It reveals the profound preciousness that was hidden by your attempts to cling. The broken teacup teaches us that everything is more beautiful when we see it clearly, including its fragility. When we stop trying to make permanent what is temporary, we discover something amazing. We can love completely without the exhausting fear of loss, because we understand that love itself transcends the forms it temporarily inhabits. But here's something interesting. What if the very knowledge you think you need to be happy is actually preventing you from discovering real wisdom? What if your cup is so full of ideas about life that there's no room for life itself to teach you? Our next story reveals why sometimes the wisest thing you can do is admit you know nothing at all. A university professor, renowned for his extensive knowledge of philosophy and religion, once visited a famous Zen master. This professor had spent decades studying Buddhist texts, had written scholarly papers about Zen philosophy, and considered himself quite knowledgeable about spiritual matters. He was eager to engage with a real master and perhaps demonstrate his own understanding. When he arrived at the master's humble dwelling, the elderly teacher welcomed him warmly and suggested they share tea before their discussion. The professor nodded, expecting that after this customary ritual, he would have the opportunity to engage in the deep philosophical conversation he had traveled so far to experience. As the master prepared tea with deliberate, mindful movements, the professor couldn't contain his enthusiasm. He began demonstrating his knowledge, quoting various scriptures, analyzing different schools of Buddhist thought, and comparing Zen philosophy to other spiritual traditions he had studied. I've read extensively about the concept of emptiness in Mahayana Buddhism, the professor said, barely pausing for breath. And I find the dialectical approach in Nagarjuna's middle way philosophy particularly fascinating when contrasted with the more direct methods of Zen that seem to bypass conceptual thinking altogether. The master listened in silence, focusing entirely on preparing the tea. When the water reached the perfect temperature, he placed a simple cup before the professor and began pouring. The professor continued his scholarly discourse, pausing only briefly to acknowledge the tea before resuming his analysis of various meditation techniques and their philosophical underpinnings. The master kept pouring. The cup filled to the brim, but he didn't stop. Tea began spilling over the rim, across the low table, and onto the professor's expensive clothes. "Stop," cried the professor, jumping up in alarm. The cup is already full. No more will go in. The master stopped pouring and looked directly at the professor with gentle eyes. Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions, theories, and knowledge. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup? The professor stood there in stunned silence. In that single moment, he realized that all his accumulated knowledge about Zen had actually become a barrier to understanding Zen itself. His cup was so overflowing with concepts, theories, and second-hand information that there was no room for direct experience or fresh insight. Now, before you think this story doesn't apply to you because you're not a scholar, let me ask you something. What is your cup full of? What assumptions, beliefs, and fixed ideas are you carrying that might be preventing you from seeing clearly? Maybe your cup is full of certainty about how relationships should work, based on past experiences that went wrong. Perhaps it's overflowing with beliefs about what success looks like, inherited from your family or culture. Your cup might be packed with judgments about yourself, stories about your limitations, or fixed ideas about what's possible for someone like you. The professor's problem wasn't that he was intelligent or educated. His problem was that his knowledge had become rigid, preventing growth and discovery. He approached the Zen master not to learn something new, but to confirm what he already believed he knew. We all carry full cups in different areas of our lives. Think about it honestly. How often do you enter conversations already knowing what the other person will say? How frequently do you approach problems with the assumption that you understand them completely? How many times do you miss new possibilities because you're trapped in old ways of thinking? Maybe you think you know your spouse or partner completely, so you stop listening to them with fresh ears. You might believe you understand a work challenge fully, missing creative solutions because you're stuck in familiar approaches. You could be convinced you know yourself entirely, preventing the growth and change that could transform your life. In Zen Buddhism, there's a concept called beginner's mind. It's the practice of approaching life with the freshness and openness of someone encountering things for the first time. The beginner's mind is naturally curious, humble, and receptive. It doesn't assume it already understands everything. The Buddha himself embodied this quality. Despite being one of history's greatest spiritual teachers, he never claimed to have figured everything out. He remained curious, experimental, and open to learning until the day he died. He often said his teaching was like a finger pointing to the moon, not the moon itself. Emptying your cup doesn't mean becoming ignorant or abandoning useful knowledge. It means holding your knowledge lightly, remaining open to new information, different perspectives, and surprising insights. It means being willing to say I don't know and mean it genuinely. Here's something that might challenge you. In practical terms, how do you empty your cup? First, notice when it's full. Pay attention to moments when you're not really listening because you think you already know what someone is saying. Observe when you approach situations with fixed expectations rather than genuine curiosity. Second, practice the phrase, I don't know, and discover how liberating it can be. Instead of always having to have an opinion or answer, sometimes you can simply be present with questions and uncertainty. There's tremendous freedom in admitting ignorance. Third, approach familiar things as if seeing them for the first time. Look at your partner, your home, your work with fresh eyes. What might you notice if you weren't carrying preconceptions? What would you discover if you could set aside everything you think you already know? The professor in our story had filled his cup with many valuable things: education, insights, analytical skills, philosophical knowledge. But if there's no room for anything new, you've stopped growing. Learning to empty your cup regularly keeps you alive, curious, and genuinely wise rather than just knowledgeable. The master offered the professor something much more valuable than confirmation of his existing beliefs. He offered him the possibility of genuine understanding. But first, the professor had to make room. Think about your own full cups right now. What would happen if you approached your biggest challenges with beginner's mind? What if you listened to your loved ones as if hearing them for the first time? What if you looked at your own life with fresh eyes, setting aside all your assumptions about who you are and what's possible? The Zen tradition is full of stories about masters who achieved breakthrough insights by temporarily forgetting everything they thought they knew. In that emptiness, wisdom has space to arise naturally. Your cup may be full of many valuable things, but if there's no room for surprise, for mystery, for the unexpected, you've closed yourself off from life's greatest teachings. The empty cup doesn't represent ignorance. It represents infinite potential, readiness to receive whatever wisdom wants to emerge. Sometimes the most intelligent thing you can do is admit you don't understand, creating space for understanding to dawn. But this brings us to perhaps the most important question of all. If you could empty your cup completely, if you could set aside everything you think you know about finding happiness and peace, where would you look? Where is the wisdom you've been seeking actually located? Our final story takes us on a journey to discover that what you've been searching for might have been with you all along. A devoted spiritual seeker named Chen had spent years studying sacred texts, practicing various meditation techniques, and exploring different paths to enlightenment. Despite his sincere efforts and genuine dedication, he felt something essential was missing. He had accumulated vast knowledge about spirituality, but hadn't experienced the direct taste of truth that all the teachings pointed toward. Having heard that a great master lived as a hermit on a sacred mountain, renowned for helping seekers find what they were looking for, Chen decided to make the difficult pilgrimage. This would surely be where he would finally discover the ultimate teaching, the final piece of the puzzle that would complete his understanding. After days of arduous climbing through dense forests, over rocky terrain, and up steep mountain paths, Chen finally reached the master's simple hut near the summit. His feet were blistered, his clothes torn, his body exhausted, but his heart was filled with anticipation. The old teacher welcomed him with genuine warmth, offering tea and a place to rest from his demanding journey. When Chen explained why he had come, seeking the ultimate truth, the final goal of spiritual practice, the essence of enlightenment itself, the master listened with gentle attention and understanding eyes. Before we discuss such profound matters, the master said with a slight smile, "Tell me what you noticed during your climb up the mountain." Chen thought for a moment, slightly puzzled by what seemed like an irrelevant question. Well, the path was steep and challenging. There were many obstacles, fallen trees blocking the way, loose rocks that made footing dangerous, stream crossings where I had to be careful not to slip. I had to rest frequently to catch my breath. What else did you see? The master inquired with patient curiosity. Chen's expression began to soften as he remembered more details. There were beautiful pine forests with sunlight filtering through the branches. Wildflowers blooming in hidden meadows that took my breath away. Clear mountain streams with water so pure I could see every pebble on the bottom. And the views, oh, the views of the valleys below were absolutely breathtaking. The master nodded encouragingly. And now that you're here at the summit, what do you expect to find? Chen hesitated, suddenly feeling uncertain about his answer. Some profound teaching or experience that will finally make everything clear, I suppose. The ultimate truth that all my years of studying have been pointing toward, but never quite revealed. The master gestured toward the magnificent panorama visible from his simple dwelling. Mountains rising majestically in the distance, clouds drifting across the vast sky, birds soaring on thermal currents, the whole world spread out below them in stunning beauty. The ultimate truth you seek, the master said gently, was present in every step of your journey up this mountain. It was in the effort of your climbing, in the beauty you observed, in the challenges you faced and overcame. It is here now, in this cup of tea warming your hands, in the mountains before us, in the space of awareness in which all these experiences arise and pass away. He continued with infinite compassion. There is nothing to attain beyond what is already present. Enlightenment is not some special state separate from your ordinary experience. It is seeing the extraordinary within the ordinary, recognizing the sacred nature of each moment, understanding that what you seek is not hidden somewhere else, but is the very awareness with which you seek. Chen looked confused and slightly disappointed. Then why did I need to make this difficult journey? Why do we study and practice at all if everything is already here? The master's eyes twinkled with understanding. The journey was necessary, not because the truth is hidden on this mountain, but because you believed it was. Sometimes we must exhaust our seeking before we can recognize what has never been absent. The spiritual path is not about finding what is missing, but about seeing what is already here. As they continued to sit in the profound quiet of the mountain evening, Chen began to understand. The truth he had been seeking was not contained in esoteric teachings or special experiences, but in the direct, unfiltered encounter with life itself, just as it is, in all its ordinary marvel. The peace he had climbed so far to find was present in his breathing right now. The wisdom he sought was in his capacity to be aware of his seeking. The enlightenment he thought existed somewhere else was in the very consciousness that was disappointed about not finding it. In that moment of recognition, Chen realized he had been carrying what he was looking for all along. Every step up the mountain, every moment of his life, every breath he had ever taken was sacred ground. He had been living on the sacred mountain his entire life without recognizing it. The master smiled, seeing the understanding dawn in Chen's eyes. This mountain you call sacred is no more sacred than the ground where your home stands. These trees are no more special than those growing in your village. This moment is no different in its essential nature from every other moment of your life. The only difference is your recognition of what was always true. As we reach the end of our journey together tonight, take a moment to feel where you are right now. Notice your breathing, the weight of your body, the space around you. This ordinary moment contains everything these ancient stories have been pointing toward. You've discovered that empty boats reveal how much suffering comes from your own stories. The monk's strawberry showed you that peace exists in this present moment, suspended between the tigers of past and future. The two arrows taught you to distinguish real pain from the extra suffering your mind creates. The farmer's wisdom revealed that your judgments of good and bad are often incomplete. The Buddha's teaching about anger showed you that emotional gifts can be declined. The broken teacup illuminated how accepting impermanence allows deeper love. The empty cup demonstrated that beginner's mind opens infinite possibilities. And finally, the sacred mountain revealed the most profound truth of all. What you seek is not hidden somewhere else. It has been with you all along, closer than your own breath. These stories are not just ancient wisdom. They are mirrors reflecting your own deepest nature. Tonight, as you rest, know that you carry this understanding within you. Return to these teachings whenever you need them. The path to peace is always just one conscious breath away. Thank you for sharing this sacred journey. May you find the strawberries waiting in each moment. Sweet dreams.